Hello, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Kim Chandler McDonald, and we're going to be talking about inform, inspire, and interview tips that you can use. So whether you're being interviewed for a job interview, whether you're giving an interview, we're going to talk about all of those things. Kim, where can people find you?
Yeah, I am so easy to find. It's ridiculous. I am actually, I've been called something of a social media whore, to be frank. You just need to put my name in Google or your search engine, and I pretty much take up the first 3 pages. And I think that's because I wear so many hats and have had such a strange career path. So the best place probably is LinkedIn, and that is just having me under Kim Chandler. Which is essentially my maiden name. So linkedin.com/in/Kim Chandler, and I am there. And you can probably get me, other than that, best on Twitter, and again, Kim Chandler. And I suppose I am on Instagram, I am on Pinterest, I am on all of those things. But those are very much based around Interview Guidebook, which is the latest book.
So you've written a book
Yeah.
about giving interviews.
Yes.
Tell me the inspiration behind it.
So it's my 7th book, and I essentially was doing some mentoring of a young gentleman in the US who is in the cyber industry, which is another hat I wear. I'm the global vice president of the Cybersecurity Advisors Network, which is Paris-based. So I do some mentoring for young people who are looking to essentially build their awareness of, or their brand in the industry. And he was talking about how he wanted to be seen as a domain expert. And I explained to him that he wasn't yet a domain expert, and the best way to essentially become a domain expert is to learn from domain experts. And that's not, it's not dissimilar really to finding a great mentor. And I don't put myself in that category at all. I don't do long-term mentoring. But in that, what I mean is that to find a really great mentor is very difficult, because generally speaking, the people you most want to be your mentor are very, very busy and have gatekeepers. So I explained to him that one of the ways to find domain experts and connect with them, if he wanted to do that, other than just watching YouTube videos of them, is to find a way to interview them. And that is sometimes easier said than done because of said gatekeepers. So given that I had many, many years of experience doing interviews with very influential people, world leaders like Madeleine Albright or F.W. de Klerk, or some of my literary heroes like John Irving and Tom Wolfe, Amy Tan. They all have gatekeepers. Even if they are promoting a product or a project, they have gatekeepers. So I explained to him that I had some tips and tricks, and I was very happy to share them with him. So put together 3 or 4 pages. And when I sent those through to him, his first response was, well, why isn't this a book? And I didn't have a good response, really. I hadn't ever thought about putting it into a book. It's one of those things that I think I often just sort of said, it's something I do. And so from there, I began to write down my tips and tricks. And I thought it would be a little paperback, little guide, sort of one of those handouts you could give away at meetings and whatnot. And it eventually turned into 300 pages of, it's a real deal.
It's a real book.
Yeah, it's a real book. And it was, I have to admit, it turned out fabulously. I'm really proud of it. And I say that with surprise, because, as I say, it wasn't something I planned to do. It wasn't even something that I thought of doing at that time. It was just a surprise. Yeah, pleasant one.
You talk about interviews are windows into thoughts. Talk to me about that.
Well, I think interviews are conversations to my mind, and or the best interviews are. They're not. They're not aggressive. In fact, it was funny. I was looking at the phrase that you used to introduce or to promote the book, the interview, and you had said that Kim argues that the interviews are not just a series of questions. And I thought, do I? And I did a word search and thought, no, I don't use the word argue at all in the book. And I don't use the word argue because I think that to be connected and to be present and to be really involved in the conversation is an amazing opportunity to connect. It's an opportunity to find synergies and similarities and bridges between yourself and the interviewer or interviewee, depending on which side of the table you're sitting, and also with your audience as well. So yeah, I think that connection and building bridges is a beautiful gift that you get when you approach interviews in that way.
You also talk about being empathetic and curious as well, don't you?
Yes. Yeah. Look, I think that honestly, I think curiosity is, well, it's when you look at children and look at how they approach the world, and that there is a sense of wonder, there is a sense of joy, and certainly a sense of curiosity. And I think that we often become quite jaded, and whether we truly believe it or not, we come across as been there, done that. And so I think that does us a disservice. Curiosity is a great gift, and goes hand in hand with empathy. And I think that the two really are the cornerstones of a great interview. Empathy allows you to connect on perhaps a deeper level, to take that extra moment to pause and understand the perspective of the person you're speaking with and potentially build trust. But the curiosity is what then drives you to perhaps ask the next question, the further question, to explore the topics in greater depth. And again, to connect on that deeper personal level and perhaps build lasting relationships. And I feel really blessed that that's one of the things I think I'm most proud of, is that I've built really deep relationships with some of the people I've interviewed and gone on to do further projects with them because of that that depth, if you will.
So what would you say was required to create a great interview?
Preparation. It's funny, I was interviewed by someone recently who talked about the fact that their superpower was winging it. And I thought to myself, yeah, no, it's really not. It's really not. Preparation is key. It first of all does you the service of knowing what you want to get out of the interview before you go into it. And in doing that, you're able to relax a bit more. It's not dissimilar to a jazz musician, a great gifted jazz musician who can improvise and riff, but they can do that because they know their scales, right? They know their instrument left, right, and backwards and forwards. And then they can go and improvise with other people who are also at the top of their games, because they're all there because they've done the work. So for me, from the interviewer's perspective, preparation is key. From an interviewee's perspective, preparation is key. It makes sense to do some research on the person who's doing the interview, so that you have an idea of who their audience is, what their pace might be like, what their style might be like. I think it also depends on what your purpose is. If you are looking for a job, doing the research gives you a far better chance of getting that second interview if you know something about that organization or that department that you can sprinkle into your conversation. If you are, for instance, a founder or an entrepreneur, it doesn't make any sense to go into an interview with a potential investor if you don't know what they might necessarily invest in, typically. I think you also show respect for the other person involved by taking the time to learn about why they're on your show. I think it's a quid pro quo, and I think it shows a great deal of respect to do so. And you're doing somebody a disservice by not doing your research, to my mind.
I totally agree. I think I find it amazing that I mean, you turned up 10 minutes early to this, 15 minutes early, you know, and it amazes me, people that turn up 2 minutes late, they're in a noisy environment, and it's like, this is about showcasing you, not me.
Right.
And they seem to have I don't know, they just seem to have the thing the wrong way round. And you know, I you know, there's people who do interviews on the TV who say that, and you know, this interview is only like 5 minutes, and it all seems to flow. But they said, "Oh yeah, it took me 3 days to do that."
Absolutely, absolutely, and there is sort of a golden rule of, you know, at the very minimum, an hour for every minute, and that's the minimum. But absolutely, you know, for instance, when I had to interview a fascinating person, Brian Greene, who is a professor of quantum physics. He is generally he's known as the string theory guy, who talks about string theory using bread, sliced bread, as a metaphor. Now, I must be very clear and say, I am not a physics, I am not quantum anything. And I was asked to do two things: review his book, which was about quantum physics and the string theory, and then interview him. And I thought, well, so the amount of time it took me to get even partially through the book was ridiculous. And then obviously doing further research and whatnot. And it turned out to be a really beautiful interview, because I was able to, because I'd done the work, I could say, first of all, be very honest. And I think that's another thing that is very key is, you know, we perhaps overuse the word authenticity, but I think you really must be honest. And if you don't understand something, say so, because it's quite likely that your audience doesn't understand it either. So you're giving your audience the permission to not understand. So I did say to Brian that I apologized and said, I managed to get about a third of the way through before my brain just froze, and I couldn't. But in that first third, what had really resonated with me is, as I understood it, that for him, the most important part of string theory was not the strings, but was the space between the strings. That was where, for him, the interesting things happened. And I said that in a former career, and I've had a few of those, in a former career, I was a performance poet. And one of the things that really was deep within my DNA as a poet was that I felt that the space between the words was as important as
I think
the
it was
word.
Miles Davis that said this. It's not the notes; it's the space between the notes. Or was it John
Come
Paul
on.
Crane or somebody like it? Yeah. So maybe someone will tell us.
Either. Well, I feel honored to even graze near to. So yes, that it was when I was able to find that connection that he and I were able to connect in a much more profound. I think that's a bit pretentious, but we certainly connected in a deeper way.
So I'm
Yeah.
going to put the URL up of the
Thank you.
interviewer's guidebook and just leave that up there for people.
Brilliant.
Which
Brilliant.
is one of the things that you've done is in addition to the book is create a checklist of things, and I've been through it, and it's great because it's got the preparation checklist, a checklist on your questions, the questions that your first 3 questions, etc., etc. And it's a lovely checklist of things that you can do.
That's great. Yeah, look, there are 10 downloadable templates, and at first it had been recommended that I put them essentially behind a wall so that only people who purchased the book were able to access it. And I thought, well, that's not who I am, frankly. I really think that because I'm a communicator, a connector, a collaborator, that this would be something that I could share, regardless of whether people.
And it's the right idea. It's the right thing, Kim. Because the thing is that if people come to them and say this is really useful, they're more likely to buy the book rather than the other way around. I would have thought.
Right.
One of the things that you talk about is about. So you talk about building rapport. You talk about storytelling and things like that. And I wasn't really going to cover those today, and we've only got 4 minutes left. One of the things that you talk about is about tone.
Yes.
So, and you talk a lot about tone. So explain to me about why tone is important.
Well, I think that you can bring people to you if you use a tone that is not aggressive, that is open, that is, I'll come back to the word empathetic. And I think that we are living in a time where it is sadly sometimes the exception rather than the rule to be welcoming. And so to my mind, it's that, what is the old wives' tale that you catch more flies with honey than vinegar or something like that. Well, I'm all for honey. I have a sweet tooth, and I think that I get much further. And I don't mean being saccharine, and I don't mean being false, but if I have a choice between being warm, welcoming, hopefully a little witty, one hopes, but certainly finding a way to connect rather than repel. Now, I do also talk in the book about how to deal with difficult situations. Now, that could be anything from, the tech not working to having to do live fact checking because you have done your research. So, when perhaps something is jarring to the facts as you know them. But I think that you can even do that from a position and with a tone of respect, candor, certainly, but there is no reason not to be respectful.
I think anybody especially the people that you were talking about, they're probably used to people challenging them. So there's nothing wrong with it, with a good challenge. And I think in most cases, people respect you for a good challenge. But
Absolutely.
It's also about being polite. And I think one of the things that, certainly having done a podcast for such a long time now, I think sometimes the podcaster or the interviewer think it's about them, and it's not. It's about the person they're interviewing.
Yes. I often say that dialogues are some of the most boring things to listen to. People tune in for dialogues, not dialogues, and sadly, there's a lot of dialogues out there.
Oh, yeah, I get a lot of people coming to me saying, I want to come and talk to you about my journey. And I say, I'm not interested, because all you're going to do is come on and talk about yourself. And actually, that isn't what's interesting. What's interesting is what you learned. It's about, you've done a whole bunch of things in your life, really interesting things, which makes you the interesting person you are. But what you've come on is to tell us about this area. And we're going to go away knowing that you're an expert in that area, and probably we'll go and buy your book.
Fingers crossed.
But this is about you. It's not about me. And I'm just here to ask stupid questions.
And you have.
To thank you. to pull out the fact that you are an expert. You've written a great book, and as I said, we should go and buy it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I really appreciate you having me on, Tim. I've been enjoying your podcasts. I appreciate the way you approach the art of interviewing and the art of conversation. And it is an art. And there's a reason that you have the listenership that you do. Again, I really appreciate you sharing your time with me.
So, Kim, where can people find you?
Yes, again, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Kim Chandler. Super easy to find. The book can be found at Interviewer's Guide. You have the URL there, or did have. It's the templates are there for you to access. And again, just I'm so easy to Google. It's ridiculous. It's rather embarrassing, to be honest.
Kim, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book. Fascinating, and a completely, you come at it from you're not coming at it from a recruiter's point of view. You're coming at it from someone who's interviewed someone like Madeleine Albright. So it's quite different, but useful resource at the same time. So thank you.
Thank you.